Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Get Houston, Florida for a national championship. Listen, is this the matchup that I think a lot of people saw coming? Not necessarily, but we got it after two what I thought were excellent games in the semifinals. Florida is entering as a 1-point favorite in the BetUS Sportsbook. So let's get into this game. First of all, still looking back on Saturday, I'll be real. I'm still trying to process Duke Houston Saturday night in San Antonio. Again, I know it's hyperbolic. I thought it was one of the best college basketball games I've ever seen, best NCAA tournament games I've ever seen. You know, we're going to have Bob Ryan on here in a minute. He's going to disagree with me. He actually said, I didn't think it was a very well-played game at all. That is who Houston is. That's not criticism of Bob Ryan. Legend. I hope to have 1/100th the career of Bob Ryan, okay? But at the same time, why I bring it up is to very simply say, yes, it was an ugly game because that is what Houston does to everyone. And so to me, when I look back on Saturday, the big conversation coming out of that game Sunday morning into Monday was, did Duke lose the game or did Houston win it? Well, I'll be real. Did Duke choke a little bit? Yeah, they kind of did. But from the beginning, Duke was not able to dictate their game to Houston. Houston dictated their game to Duke. We talked about it on the Saturday night show. But remember, that was a game where basically, for the most part, you had a situation where Houston, I thought early on, sped Duke up. I thought Duke handled it well. But again, every time that Duke had the opportunity to make a run, they couldn't. And ultimately, when you look back on that game, more than anything, again, it was played on Houston's terms. So don't tell me that it was just that Duke choked. Duke was also held 15 points below their season average. That is a Houston thing. Duke was out-rebounded by 12 despite having a huge size advantage. That is a Houston thing. Kaman Malawach, who you know that I love, was held to 0 rebounds. That was a Houston thing. And then, oh, by the way, 10 minutes down the stretch, 1 field goal. That is Houston. That is who they are. That is what they are about. And so that, to me, is the story from Saturday and why they won the game, because they forced Duke to play their game, and that ultimately led to success. I think the thing that was interesting about the first game, Florida-Auburn, it was kind of the opposite. Florida was not able to play their game, and I thought Auburn actually dictated that game early. We know what happened. We all saw it. We all talked about it on Saturday night. But you look at that game, Auburn jumps out to the big lead. We discussed it. Points in the paint. They were dominant. And then all of a sudden the second half starts and Florida flips a switch, and we just have to give credit to that coaching staff. Listen, I said on Saturday night, I'm not X's and O's guy. I'm not the guy that never played at a high level that's going to tell, oh, Florida did this and they did drop Kevin. That's not who I am. What I am about is giving credit where it's due. And whatever that coaching staff did at the half, it had Auburn all sorts of flustered. 12 second half turnovers for Auburn. 12 second half turnovers for Auburn. They had, how about this? 12 points total in the first 12 minutes of the second half after scoring 46 in the first half, okay? And so I just bring it up because why Florida is in the national championship game. The defense locked down, and of course, Walter Clayton, you already know. We don't need to go through all the amazing stats. As I said, he's putting up a Kemba Walker-type March Madness, 34 points on Saturday night, 30 in the Elite Eight, becoming the first player since Larry Bird to go for 30 in an Elite Eight game and then a Final Four game to follow it. So that is the kind of performance, that is the kind of history that we are seeing from Walter Clayton, and I cannot wait to see him on Monday night against this Houston defense. So let's bring it full circle to that Houston defense. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about Monday's game. As we're recording late Sunday, Florida is, again, a 1-point favorite. To me, listen, I think this thing comes down to a few things. One, who can dictate tempo? We know that Florida is a team that wants to score in the upper 80s, in the 90s. Now, Florida, to its credit, is a great defensive team. They don't get enough credit. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we also know that they were the number 3 scoring offense in college basketball, that they put up 85 points per game, and that they can score on absolutely anybody. And so, first of all, I just think that's the most interesting part of this game. Duke was a high-scoring team, but Duke was a very efficient defense. And the question becomes, can Florida, a little bit more veteran, will they be less rattled? The one thing, I think sometimes the conversation about Duke's challenges in the ACC are a little bit overblown. Can't say Florida's not battle-tested. Played Tennessee 3 times, played Auburn twice, played Kentucky once, played Alabama once or twice, I guess. And so I just bring it up because Florida, I think, is going to be able to better handle the physicality of Houston. But watching Houston in person, it's not just physicality. They play so fast, they speed you up, they make you so uncomfortable, okay? And that was the thing that stood out against Duke. It wasn't that Duke wasn't quote unquote physical. It's that when there's a loose ball, they literally have 5 guys sprinting to it. They have guys diving for it. And I just remember 1 or 2 plays where there's a Duke guy about to pick up a ball, and he has a Houston guy flying out of nowhere diving at him. And I think that's going to be the key. Can Florida dictate tempo? Can Florida execute in the half court? And can Florida win a defensive struggle? Because I don't think it's going to be the kind of game where Florida is just able to put up 90-something points. The good thing is you can't say they're not battle-tested in this tournament, having to win games in the 60s and 70s. 77-75 win over UConn in that round of 32. 84-79 in the Texas Tech game where they had to rally late. And then the game against Auburn was in the 70s, and their defense was still enough. I also think 2 other variables will be interesting. 1, the size and athleticism down low of Florida against Houston. Listen, I love Houston. Want to give them all the credit in the world. But it very clearly gave problems to Houston on the offensive end of the court. Houston may have won, but it did give them problems. I thought it was interesting. How about this? Houston shot on Saturday 45% from 3 and 37% from the field overall. And so if you take out the 3-point shots, Houston was 13 of 39 from the field. What is that? That's 33% from on 2-pointers, 45% on 3-pointers. What does that mean? It means that the size and athleticism of Duke around the rim gave them fits. I know I criticized Malowacz earlier, but he did have a block. Cooper Flagg had 3 different blocks in the paint. And also, Duke, to its credit, they did not rebound great, but they rebounded pretty well on the defensive end of the court. And so I only bring it up because that length of Duke did give Houston problems. We know about Florida's length, Alex Condon, Micah Hanlogton, Ruben Chinyelu. So how does Florida handle that? And then I think the final factor is, obviously, it goes without saying, how does Houston defend, and what is their answer for Walter Clayton? Because I can tell you, being in the arena, I saw every different type of thing. Auburn tried to do everything on a Walter Clayton. They picked him up 3-quarter court. They face guarded him where Miles Kelly wasn't even looking at the ball at certain points, and they still had no answer. 34 points for Walter Clayton. I think the incredible thing about Walter Clayton, and we talked about this, is the efficiency with which he does it. He doesn't force things. He isn't trying to do too much. And then, oh, by the way, what is also important is that, again, he doesn't force it. In that game against Auburn, 11 of 18 from the field. That's over 50% shooting. 50% shooting against Texas Tech, 7 of 14. Had a little bit of a sketchy game against Maryland, but had a great game against UConn, and, of course, was great in the SEC tournament in the opener. So how do you defend Walter Clayton? All of that. To a pick. Let's get to a pick. I'm going to do it. Let's make the pick. Florida, 1-point favorite in the BetUS Sportsbook. I'm taking the Houston Cougars. Okay, love me some Cougars. Torres is Cougar crazy. I'm taking the Houston to win. First of all, listen, I learned this a few years ago when I picked Georgia to win the national championship the first year in football in the preseason. Then I backed out the night of the national championship game. If your preseason pick is playing for a title, you ride that out. but I picked Houston in the preseason. I picked Houston before the tournament. And I think there's a couple variables here. One, first of all, the things that Florida, in theory, should get, the things that Florida would do to give Houston trouble are the same things that Duke did on Saturday night, right? What was going to give Houston problems? The size and athleticism of Duke. Well, Houston figured it out. Now, are they going to be able to shoot 10 of 22 from three, 45%? I don't know. But what I do know is if they handled Duke's size, why in theory can they not handle Florida's size? So I think there's that factor. I think there's the factor of if anyone can possibly slow down Walter Clayton, it's got to be Houston, right? I mean, listen, they're special. There's no other way to put it. There's nothing else to say. They are an elite defensive team, and if there's anybody that, again, is going to give them any sort of trouble, to me, it would be this Houston team. And there's no one that's going to slow down Walter Clayton, but can they stop him a little bit? Yeah, I think they can. Finally, let me say this, and I truly believe this, and I've been thinking a lot about this. I believe in my heart of hearts that Houston might just be wildly underrated and nobody realizes it, okay? So we've talked about this pretty much at length, is that Houston, I've shared the stats. They've lost one game since November. They've lost one game in regulation. 3 of their 4 losses are in overtime. Their losses, by the way, Alabama on a neutral in November, Auburn on a neutral in November, San Diego State on a neutral in November, Texas Tech at home in overtime. So all good losses to good teams. They went 19-1 in the second toughest conference in all of college basketball. We've talked about it. BYU was on a 9-game winning streak when they faced Houston in the Big 12 tournament. Got destroyed. Arizona played tougher against, well, Arizona played well against Houston both games. I shouldn't say that. But Arizona was a team that had Duke sort of on the ropes at certain points in that game. And Houston beat them twice in the last month of the season. I just don't think we've talked about this team enough. And I keep saying it all year long. First 80% of the season, it was a lot of love for Auburn, and it was justifiable. They were destroying everybody in college basketball. From there, Duke got hot late. The Cooper Flag momentum picks up, all that. And then the last week or so, as Florida advanced through the SEC tournament, it was all about Florida. At no point did we ever acknowledge, oh, Houston's awesome as well. Well, right now they're 35-4. They've lost one game, as I said, since November. And I just bring it up because, to me, I think this is their season. So give me Houston 74, Florida 72, close, fun national championship game. I will take Houston as your national champion.